Hello, my name is Chris Davis. I am your host for Bid Talk, Auction Ohio's podcast that comes to you weekly and is always a kind of behind the scenes look. It is always exciting. It's always educational. We're going to introduce you to what happens in the auction method of marketing, and excited to have you with us again this week. Before we get to our guest today, I want to talk a little bit and make a couple of notes about a couple of things that are happening that are unique to this week. We actually have National Auctioneers Day that is the third Thursday in the month, and we've just recently celebrated that National Auctioneers Day. We also have a National Auctioneers Week, believe it or not, the first week of May. So as though us auctioneers don't have enough for one day, we get a whole week, and who knows, maybe we'll progress that to a month, who knows. Also, it is Earth Day coming up this Saturday, and this Friday at our warehouse, we're going to have an Earth Day celebration in and during the pickup time. So if you're purchasing things and picking things up, or even if you're not, honestly, and you want to stop by, we've got a little gift bag for you in celebration of Earth Day. It's going to be a plant and a lollipop. And so just clear instructions, and I'm sure they'll tell you in the back, you eat the lollipop and you plant the plant, not reverse. Don't do the opposite of that. But it's something that we celebrate here, and to touch on that just for a minute, what we do in the auction industry is Earth Day about every day. We have a process where we help folks sell their things, and rather than those things be disposed of in landfills, and we repurpose those things to folks who can use them, in a utilitarian way. As a matter of fact, Ray and I this morning, and before I introduce my guest, Ray and I are using and have a couple of coffee cups that are part of that recycling process. So if you ever stop in our office and for any reason whatsoever, and we offer you a cup of coffee, you're probably going to get a cup that has any number of logos, any number of companies on it, and any number of styles and patterns, because they're there, and there's no reason for us to not use those things. So appreciate you being with us again this week. Again, I'm your host, Chris Davis, but exciting to me, I want to introduce to you, if you haven't already met him before, and some of you that are listening to this podcast have, but Ray Dailey is on the real estate side of our business. Now, he is a big proponent, always talking about the opportunities on the personal property side, but we want to talk a little bit about some of the folks that have been instrumental in who we are as a company. They are the company, in essence, and Ray is one of those. And welcome, Ray. Appreciate you being here. We've been together a long time, you and I have, and we've had a lot of conversations as, we've been in the vehicles driving and doing auctions, and I can't imagine how many that's been. And, our story, what you and I have experienced, goes back to 1988. But I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about what happened prior to that, so we can kind of build a little bit of a foundation as far as your history in the real estate business. I'm not going to ask you to go back to your childhood. That's going to take about a 10-hour truck ride, and I don't think we want to do that in this short time we have for a podcast. But and we'll touch a little bit on where we picked up as you and I in our relationship. So tell us, your part in the real estate industry, how that happened, and how you became engaged in the business.
I was with American Standard and had transferred from Columbus to Detroit, Michigan, or Dearborn actually, with American Standard. And then about 2.5 years later, they split the division and decided to have a commercial division in Columbus, Ohio. So I got transferred back to Columbus. I was here about 2 years with American Standard, and they decided to move the company to New Jersey. And I decided I was not going to New Jersey. One of the fellows that transferred back to Columbus had used a broker in Upper Arlington by the name of Bill Logan. And he mentioned to me, if you're not going to go to New Jersey and you're thinking about real estate, why don't you go talk to Bill? So I talked to Bill in late 1969, and in March of 1970, I was licensed.
In 1970?
1970.
And so you started with Bill Logan, and then you stayed in that world for a little while.
I was with Logan, became Gallery of Homes, the first national franchise, until about 1980.
So, fast forward a little bit, you and I met each other, and you were part of Max Holzer's world
Right.
at that time.
Right.
And Max ran a company called, at that time, Holzer, Wollum, White and Straight. When I, was
Well, initially it was Holzer Wollum. Then it was Holzer Wollum White and Straight, and then Holzer Wollum Beekler White.
Beekler White.
I was the trainer, and I actually got 3 paychecks from Max.
Is that right?
One from each of those companies.
One from each one of those. And so, mentioning or just talking about that for a little bit. So, most folks probably don't know, and, as we talk in this podcast about the behind the scenes and meet some of the folks that are part of the company, Ray being one of those that's trained, I would say innumerable, I don't know what the count would be, but a number of real estate agents in the business, and, some notable ones, naturally. But in that process, you became a training director, right? So you gallery homes, for a number of years.
I managed, I sold, I trained.
Did it all, right?
Did it all, yeah.
Did it all. So when I came to Columbus in 1988, you were a training director.
Yep.
And I actually sat through your class for, 2 weeks?
About 8 days.
Was it 8 days? It
Yep.
seemed like 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure. Thorough, and I would have to say, probably something that's missing in a lot of brokerages today, because it was the foundation that set everyone in the right direction. We all know that it didn't mean that everyone that got in the business or went through that process was going to stay in the business. It still is 20% of the folks that
Yep.
do 80% of the work. That still happens. But in that process, it was, I was introduced to you. I think you told me at the time something about the auction business. Your words were,
It'll never happen in Columbus.
It'll never happen in Columbus, Ohio. So I had come from Southern Ohio, an auction family, and excited. I'd met Dick Fagan through another relationship, and introduced them to Max Holzer, and wanted to launch this auction process in Columbus. And there's a whole backstory to the reason that I ended up coming to Columbus anyhow. But in that process, I'm in class, and I keep coming back to that auction process, and you keep saying, that's great, I don't think it's going to work here, right? So got out of training, and then I went to work in it was Copeland Mill at the time, if I recall correctly, so off of Cleveland Avenue.
Northeast office.
The Northeast office, and Roger Crawford was the manager there. And in that introduction, I was introduced to a lot of things that we didn't quite understand where I came from. Roger said you need to farm an area, and I was visually trying to figure out what farming had to do with real estate at the time. It was kind of funny. But I come to understand that we didn't have a tractor to do it. Farming was just canvassing and marketing our service or opportunities within a certain development, subdivision area, whatever that would be. But, it was all of those folks during that time. And then you continued to, do the training as training director. When did you leave that position, and then you managed?
I trained up until about 1993 or 4, and then I actually managed the Northeast office for a couple years.
Right.
And then I went back into sales in late 95.
In 95.
Yep.
And then you and I teamed up. How long have we been together as far as you working directly in Auction Ohio's world?
October of 2009.
October 2009. I'm amazed you don't remember the exact date and the time and what the weather was like. That's a little bit of a pun in our world. Ray Dailey is actually, he's got this wealth of, he's got a memory that you can remember about anything. I always laugh and tell folks, they'll say, what did you sell that property for, or where was that property at? And I'll call you and say, Ray, you remember the property down on North End or whatever? And you'll say what the address was, when we sold it, what it sold for, who bought it, what the weather was like, who was there. And I think you have friends, if I'm not mistaken, that call you on occasion to use you for the same purpose. You're like Google before Google existed, I think.
I was their long-term memory.
Long-term memory. So you can get plugged in at about any time. Things have changed, naturally, in the business, right? So let's not talk about the auction side for a minute, but talk a little bit about what life was like doing real estate prior to this auction method of marketing that we're going to tie into. But You used the term that you were before. You were BC, right?
I tell people that I've been in the business since BC, and that always kind of raises their eyebrow. And then I explain that BC to me means before computers, before cell phones, before calculators. You couldn't buy a desktop calculator that just did 4 basic functions for less than $100 when they came out.
Right.
And copy machines that really worked, one where you didn't have to take it and run it through a heat process and like a 2 or 3 step process. So
Right.
things were a little different.
A little bit different at the time.
Yeah.
If you've ever sold real estate, and many of us have, and many of you that maybe are watching have been involved in the sale of real estate, and when the listing agent comes out and sits down and pulls out that packet of paperwork, we have everything today from listing contracts and lead disclosure and property disclosure form and consumer guide to agency and just walk down the line. But what was it like back then? What did the form look like? Because I think it was just one, wasn't it?
Well, the listing form back in 1970 was a 5.5 by 8.5 tablet, 2 pages. Put a carbon in between the first and second one. That was the listing form. Place for the address, basic description of the property, give them a carbon copy, take the original back to the office and mail it to the board of realtors, who then created the 4-ups that they shipped to us 2 or 3 times a week. 4 MLSs to 1 piece of paper. You had to tear them apart and put them in a book and file them. Along with those 4-ups came what they called hot sheets. You look at the hot sheet and it'll tell you what went into contract since last week. Since you got the picture, and you could turn the MLS over and write down the in-contract date, and then a week or 2 or a month later you could write down what it sold for and what type of financing might have been used. So that was your database for real estate long before computers. So.
Right. So you in essence, kept your own comps. You kept all of the history as far as what happened.
And usually I could only keep up 3 areas, northwest, north, and northeast. There were like 7 more areas, and there's no way you could keep those up.
No.
And if you went on vacation, you didn't want to come back.
Right.
Because there's a bushel basket of 4-ups on your chair that you had to sort and go through and play catch up with for the next week and a half.
Yeah. So you got to go through. Reentry is tough today, right? We think emails are tough, and they are. I mean, I always joke all the time. I say, if they find one more way to communicate, I'm out of here. Right? Willingly, I might be willing to go, because we now have email and text, and we have social media notifications and phone calls. We live in a different world. That one certainly was unique. Computers came into existence.
And I would see a new agent after the computer arrived complaining about how slow the computer was. They're trying to get stuff from the courthouse. I wanted to walk over and slap him. I said, what you're taking 45 seconds, which is 15 seconds too long for what you want to be.
Right.
I used to have to get in my car and drive to the courthouse.
Right.
Pay $0.25 for a piece of paper with about half of that information on it. Mm-hmm. And if I wanted to see what the plat looked like, I had to go to the map room, where they conveniently had tracing paper, and I could trace the plat.
Right.
That was an hour and a half to 2 hours out of my life, so I usually went for 2 or 3 properties at one time, planning ahead. Now your decision is, in 30 seconds, do I want it in black and white or color?
that's the decision. Right. It's like, it's not that bad. We've come a long way. It's different, the computers, and I think you're the one that gave me a little bit of an education into DOS, right? Where we could literally, we always kind of wrote code a little bit. We could plug in what we wanted, those old 286s to do, and as we move forward.
Well, I used to create a spreadsheet with 5 payment plans on it. 20% down, 10% down, 5% FHA and VA. So whenever I sat down with a buyer, they came to my open house, I could hand them 5 different payment plans for that particular property.
Right.
I had those numbers plugged into it.
Right.
So.
Right. So things have changed a little bit as we, live in the world that you and I live in now. So October of what year again Did you and I start?
2009.
2009. So something instrumental probably in 2007, 8, 9.
Well, there was about a 2-year period where nobody was selling diddly squat. And Chris came in one day and said, Ray, and of course nobody was selling, which meant the auction business was doing pretty well. And Chris came in and said, I'm sinking. I need some help. And how would you like to go to work and get paid?
Yeah.
Sounded like a good plan to me.
Good plan, right? Yeah.
And he told me, he said, I could get 2 people, and I can't teach them in 20 years what I know you already know.
Right.
So, and it's been a good fit.
It's been a really good fit. You know, I would say probably you've embraced the auction business.
Yep.
You know, more so than you thought that you would if we turned the clock back.
A lot.
20 years prior to that. 20 years prior to that, during that time, and even prior to that, you were always a little bit involved in the auction side from, you know, managerial position. But, you know, we have traveled a bunch. We have sold a lot of real estate at auction. You know, I tell folks it was a relationship where, you know, sometimes folks will say, you know what, you complete me, right? Well, the truth is, I think that it's not that completion side of you make me what I am or what I've been able to do, and I think it's vice versa as well. We've always worked well together. The cool part, and if you've never had this, we never really had to, we didn't have questions about what you were doing in the process. We didn't need updates. We didn't need a daily update meeting to know where we were with things, because literally I was free at that point to go out and meet with clients and sign up auction opportunities to help them, you know, in their point of change, and then hand that file over to Ray Dailey, and you would then manage that process start to finish. And not only did you manage getting it in multiple listing and back then loading it onto the website and then preparing purchase contracts to be used at the auction, you went to the auctions. You went to about every one of them and registered folks and got them checked in and managed that all the way through the closing process. So there's not too many things that you don't know about how that works. As a matter of fact, I guess I'm just thinking a little bit, probably ought to hire you back as a training director again. Maybe I'm going to move you into a different position when we get done here. But it's been a good ride. We've had a lot of fun. If
we back up to the early 70s, I actually, all the realtors at that time actually did their own settlement sheets. We literally made the phone calls to the lenders, got the payoffs, typed up the seller's side, typed up the buyer's side, and it was one piece of paper, seller and buyer statements.
Right. Well, think about it for a minute. We didn't have a relationship with a lender that qualified our buyers. We did that.
Yeah.
Right? We knew what those requirements were, whether it was a conventional or an FHA or a VA. You had to know that stuff.
You had to do it.
You had to do it. You didn't have the lender that you could lean on. And we did do, you know, we had form contracts, and we can't play attorney and, you know, change things, certain things, but we did our own contracts. In Southern Ohio, you know, when I came to Columbus, another one of those big changes for me was, you know, we had something called a title company. I didn't know what a title company was. In Southern County, we had an attorney that did an opinion, and so it was really just a title opinion. It's kind of interesting that, you know, the banking at that time too, and I'm not saying that it hasn't gotten better and probably had some changes that needed to take place, but then we had, you know, a loan committee that met just about every day at the bank. And so when a borrower, a potential borrower, went in to check on getting a loan for a house, they'd get an answer the next day, and we'd close in 3 or 4 days, you know, maybe 5 days. And the only thing we waited on was that opinion letter from an attorney, whoever that bank used as far as their counsel. And we closed. And then I get up here and I find out we have title companies, and there's this thing called title insurance.
Well, that was pretty new in the early 70s
was
too.
It as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There was a transition period where we were attorney title opinions were phasing out, and title insurance was becoming the way it was going to happen. So
right.
That was in Franklin County, but if you went into one of the adjoining counties, it was almost always an attorney's opinion of title.
Right.
So.
And you're right, we closed our own deals. We didn't have, you know, we prepared our own settlement statements. We knew what the conveyance fee had to be. Those were just things that were just second nature, you know, at that
You
time.
prorated interest, you did.
You prorated the interest, you did the entire settlement statement, you knew what the amount was that was necessary for the payoff. Even if you didn't get a per diem from them, it was just that was that was required. I mean, you had to know how to do that, or you just had to have a broker that knew how to do it. So things, certainly have changed a little bit. So we've gone from BC, no computers and no calculators and all of that, right? That BC, and now we're all online. We now sell real estate, and you and I don't get in the truck anymore, and we don't go out to the site, and we don't meet the buyers. It's all virtual. It's changed. I mean, it's different. Who knows where it's going to go as time passes. But we're here. We're here today as a result of our past, and so appreciate our relationship. I guess I want to change gears a little bit, and it's always, I think, interesting to me. The question that's always asked is, who's Ray Dailey, and where'd you come from, and where you're going, right? And we share some commonality in that, where we're going in our faith, and we're certainly not shy about that. But I'm always happy to talk about your past, because I think the things that folks wouldn't know about Ray Dailey, we're going to coin this segment. We're going to have you back more often. It's going to be Back in the Day with Ray, I think, or whatever it's going to be. But it's kind of interesting for folks, I think, to understand that if they knew Ray Dailey when he was 20 years old or 21 years old, right, what would they be surprised to know about Ray Dailey?
They'd probably be surprised to know that in about a 1.5 to 2 year period there, I probably had anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 drags. And that was with a car.
That's not a cigarette, right?
That's not smoking.
Not smoking.
I'm an old hot rodder. And had a 56 Chevy that was pretty quick. And I don't think I lost but about 1 or 2 races in that period of time. And I had my girlfriend when I was 18, she was 17 when I got that car. She goes to Bob Chevrolet and bought me a Corvette Duntov cam, Corvette dual valve springs and solid lifters, and it just got a whole lot faster.
Sounds like a pretty good girlfriend. Did you keep her?
We met, it will be 70 years ago this April. This August 13th.
70 years ago.
70 years ago we met, and we've been married 66.5 years.
Well, she's still your girlfriend.
She's still my girlfriend.
Still your girlfriend, yeah.
Yep.
She's a sweetheart. She's
She
your
is.
bride.
Yep.
She's been good. So you're a motorhead.
I'm
You're
a motorhead.
drag racing, right? And she goes out and buys you things that I'm sure when she walked into Bob Chevrolet, they looked at her and probably thought,
You want what?
you know what? How do you know what that is, right? So what happened? What changed the drag days? And you've got a lot of stories. We're not going to talk. I mean, you and I have had a lot of conversations about your drag races, but
Well, when we were 19, I married that girlfriend.
you married the girlfriend. Okay, that's good.
And we had children,
Oh yeah,
and that kind of got in the way of drag racing.
yes.
So then I bought a ski boat.
Oh, a ski boat. That's
Yeah,
better.
so I probably taught 125 people how to water ski
Right.
as well. So,
Right.
so that's something we could do as my kids started growing up together.
Yeah.
Actually had a house trailer on the Muskingum River south of McConnellsville for about 10 years. So
Right.
that was our weekend getaway.
Right. So, drag race cars. You grew up in a family that was musically inclined. Now, you're from West Virginia.
I'm from Parkersburg.
Parkersburg, right. So, musically inclined. And so, you still, on Tuesday nights here, is it every Tuesday?
First and third.
First and third Tuesday here. If you want to come to a concert, I'm not saying we can open the doors to everybody. We don't have enough room to sit you all. But you sit and still have jam sessions with some of your friends. And
Yeah.
you still play guitar.
I've been playing guitar for 76 years.
76 years playing guitar.
My dad was a lead guitar player and a piano player. My mom played guitar and banjo. So music has always been a part of my
That's been a
life.
part of what you've done.
Yep.
In that music, your family, so you played in a gospel quartet for a while. You were,
My dad was with the Gospel Ambassadors playing piano from 69 until he died in 91. I was on 3 or 4 of their records before I joined them.
okay,
I was with them for the last 10 years of their existence.
okay.
Not only as a guitar player, but as one of the trio, one of the quartet.
Right.
One of the guys retired, and I became one of the Gospel Ambassadors. So.
Wow.
And my brother's had a music ministry since he was 18 years old.
Yep.
He's 81.
So always been involved in ministry in some capacity. You play pre-COVID naturally because that changed a little bit, but you
I was with playing rhythm guitar with the Buckeye State Harmonica Club.
Got it.
And we were doing 15 to 18 senior centers a year consistently for the last, as long as I was with them, and for many years before I joined them. But COVID essentially closed that business down, so.
Right. Just, no opportunities at that point, and that might come back again.
It may, but what remains of our small harmonica club comes to this same location the first and third Saturday for a couple hours so that we kind of keep together and enjoy music. So.
Right. So hot rod, play music.
Oh, I also owned an airplane back in the early 70s.
For a while, so you flew for a little while in real estate, owned, real estate brokerage, right? So Galleria Homes, for a while.
Yep.
Been on the real estate scene for a long, long time.
I started my 54th year last month.
So 54th year.
Yep.
So it's a good run. It's a good run. We got a little bit of work to do, so we'll see if we can get you to 75 year run. We'll see how that works out. We've been together a long time. So thank you. We're going to do some more. We're going to have you come back because I think there's some unique stories that folks would love to hear about some of the real estate experiences that I've had the privilege of hearing. And again, Ray and I have spent a lot of time driving, and we've been across this state, crisscrossed it lots of times, and
been to Southern Ohio a few times.
And we've had some good conversation. It's been a good friendship. It's the best part, and I think I alluded to that last week in our podcast. It's been it's a great place. It's a great culture. It's a family kind of a culture because we really do treat each other as family here. It's that unique. And I would say you're probably a bit of a patriarch, I'm going to guess. So do folks around here still respect you, or do they mess with you anymore? They're good? They're not messing with you too much. Make sure that they don't. I'll come to your defense. But again, thank you. Appreciate you being on the podcast for this week. Again, thank you. And we're going to share some more stories. And I think, again, next week you're going to meet Brian, my son, who is, doing real well in the auction business. He's got a younger insight into, and he's going to be at the helm more so than I am as time passes. And so we're excited for you to know a little bit more about him. We're going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to go back in history a little bit to when he was a kid and, what his story is and how he got to where he is today. And so it'll be a good conversation, so I'll invite you back next week. This week, just to touch a little bit on what's happening in Auction Ohio. Online, we have some interesting things that are coming up for you to bid on. I'm just going to touch on a couple of those things. In Warsaw, Ohio, we actually have a seller who, Petticord Rice, one of our affiliate auction companies there, is selling a lot of wood-carved animals and some other things. So if you're in the market for a 6 to 7 foot carved bear, you can find one there. He's got some other unique things that are in Warsaw, Ohio, and that's out toward that Coshocton market. Dee Dee Davis. Now, Dee Dee's not related to us. And if she is, then we're going to have a hard conversation. But she's not related to us, but Dee Dee, and I think it's in Westerville, has a unique conversation that has some, I think there's a Giglieri bronze that's in that. She's got some pretty cool, high-end collectibles that in the theme, I guess, that I'm trying to paint is that we've got some of that outdoors kind of stuff. Maybe this Earth Day thing is responsible for all of that kind of aligning, and it's all happening at the same time. Ohio Online Auctions has a lot of coin auctions that's online right now. So if you're a collector of coins, if you're trying to buy silver and gold to put those things back, we've got some great real estate that's coming up. Brian just posted a couple of real estate auctions, one that's on Eastview, 6931 Eastview in Worthington, and 84 Clinton Street in Columbus, kind of that downtown marketplace. So if you're in the market for real estate, if you're in the market for some unique stuff, there's some things that you'll be able to find there. We always like to do a tip of the week. And so the tip of the week today, last week we talked about placing bids online and being able to place a max bid. And this week we're going to talk about a little bit of self-control in that tip of the week. And that self-control is this. When you're buying things online, be patient. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of opportunities that continue to circle back. And if you don't get what you're looking for today, if you maybe feel that that price is a little bit too strong, then be patient, because whatever you're looking at today, we're most likely going to have again in a few days or in the next week or a couple of weeks. So be patient. Take the emotion out of buying in an auction format, because what happens if you let your emotions become a part of the process, and then it becomes a bidding war. Now you're bidding against someone who you don't know. Now you're mad at someone that you don't know because they're bidding against you. And the emotions take over, and pretty soon when the auction's done, it's the same emotions in a live auction. We know what that was like, right? So in a live auction, you're standing there, and all of a sudden I'm going to buy it. I don't care. I got an attitude all of a sudden. I'm going to outbid you, and I'm going to buy that, whatever it is. It happens online. So it is someone outbids you, and all of a sudden it's frustration, and you bid one more time, and then the next immediate emotion is, oh my gosh, I might get it bought. And as the price raises, right, it's that same back and forth emotion. So what you don't want to do is get it bought and then really think, I don't know what I just did, and I don't know why I just did it. So we're going to help you out a little bit. Set some parameters in place. Make a decision about what you're willing to pay for a certain item, and then stick to it if you can, right? And that's going to give you a little bit of guidance as far as, I'm not saying that one more bid isn't the bad idea, but what I'm saying is keep it within some parameters so that you don't find yourself, in your opinion anyhow,